Just hours from now, the former New Milford youth football coach accused of shoving a young player will face a judge. This story has made headlines across the country. And your reporter, Roger Susanen, is live now in studio breaking down what we expect to happen in court today.
Yeah, Tracy, you're right. This case has gotten a lot of attention. And police say Daniel Fazio will be arraigned on charges that he actually pushed a 7-year-old player during a game last month. Now, Fazio has denied those allegations through a spokesperson who says the former coach would never hurt a child, but soon he may have to instead convince a judge and a jury. Now, police say this all started at a youth football game in New Milford. Back then, Fazio was an assistant coach with the New Milford Bulls. And investigators say during that game, Fazio actually shoved one of the children on the other team, the Water Oak Warriors, with enough force that player actually fell to the ground. A very short time later, the Bulls announced that Fazio was no longer with the team and that the organization does not condone his behavior. Fazio and his spokesperson responded days later denying that he did anything wrong, writing, "We are confident that the facts will come to light in court and that these charges will ultimately be dismissed. As long-standing members of this community, as professionals, and as a family, we would never harm a child." Today, Fazio faces 3 criminal charges, including risk of injury to a child. Live in the studio, I'm your reporter, Roger Suzanne, in Channel 3 Eyewitness News. Tracy, I'll send it back to you.
Roger.